Have you ever woken up from a dream so vivid, so strange, it felt like it came from somewhere far deeper than your own mind? What if that dream wasn't just yours, but a piece of something ancient, an inheritance shared by everyone? Carl Jung asked these questions and introduced the collective unconscious, his breakthrough theory showing how our personal dreams echo myths and symbols that have appeared throughout history. Jung once described a patient who dreamed of a mysterious ritual, almost like a scene from a lost Hollywood epic, even though she'd never seen anything like it before. By the end of this film, you'll see how those strange dreams link you to a 100-year-old psychological breakthrough. And it all started with a meeting that would change the course of psychology forever. Jung's journey into new territory began with a partnership that once seemed unbreakable. When he first met Freud in Vienna in 1907, their conversation reportedly spanned many hours, fueled by a shared fascination with the mysteries of the unconscious mind. Freud, already established as the father of psychoanalysis, praised Jung as a leading figure in the movement. Together, they set out to chart the hidden depths of human thought, convinced they could bring the secrets of the unconscious into the light. But beneath their collaboration, differences simmered, differences that would soon become impossible to ignore. Freud's view of the unconscious was rooted in repressed sexual desires and primal instincts, all shaped by the pressures of society. He believed that dreams served as disguised wish fulfillment, driven by tensions between these buried urges and the rules we learn as children. Jung, at first, accepted these theories. But as he worked with patients, he noticed patterns and symbols that didn't fit Freud's model. He saw recurring images in myths and fairy tales, stories from different cultures and eras that echoed in the dreams of people who had never heard them before. Jung wondered if they pointed to something much older and more universal. The real break came when Jung introduced his theory of the collective unconscious, a vast, inherited storehouse of memories and archetypes shared by all people. Freud rejected this idea outright, calling it mystical and unscientific. For Freud, psychology needed to stay grounded in the tangible, the clinical, and above all, the personal. Jung's interest in myth, symbolism, and spiritual experience seemed like a step backward, a move that threatened to undermine the scientific credibility they had both worked so hard to build. Their disagreements quickly turned personal. Freud had trusted Jung, not just as a collaborator, but as a confidant. Jung, meanwhile, struggled with the choice between loyalty to Freud and loyalty to his own ideas. The two clashed most sharply over the meaning of religion. Freud dismissed religion as an illusion of dependency, whereas Jung saw it as a gateway to universal symbols in the collective psyche. The gulf between them only widened, and their arguments became bitter. By 1913, the split was final. Freud ended the friendship, and Jung found himself isolated from the mainstream of psychoanalysis. The loss was painful and risky. Freud's influence was enormous, and Jung's reputation now stood on uncertain ground. Still, Jung pressed on, developing his ideas in solitude. He paid a steep price for his independence, but he refused to turn back. What followed would become the heart of Jung's legacy. No longer bound by Freud's vision, Jung began exploring the shared stories and images that seemed to connect all people. He mapped out the patterns he called archetypes, universal figures and themes that appear in myths, rituals, art, and even in the dreams of people today. Over time, these ideas inspired thinkers far beyond psychology, shaping fields like literature, anthropology, and religious studies. Jung's willingness to risk everything for a new way of understanding the mind set him apart as a true pioneer. Freed from Freud's shadow, Jung began mapping the hidden blueprints of our shared mind, his collective unconscious. Certain stories and images seem to strike a chord no matter where you're from. Maybe it's the wise figure who appears just when the hero needs guidance, or the journey where someone faces darkness and comes out changed. Jung called this phenomenon the collective unconscious, a shared, inherited layer of the mind that holds humanity's universal experiences, symbols, and patterns. This isn't the personal unconscious, which is shaped by your own memories and life events. The collective unconscious is more like a blueprint, an ancient code passed down through generations, quietly shaping how we see the world. Jung's idea didn't come from theory alone. While working with patients, he noticed something odd. People would describe dreams filled with images, serpents, labyrinths, great trees, that matched myths and rituals from cultures they'd never studied. In his 1929 writing, Jung pointed to cases where patients reported unprompted snake visions, much like those in ancient texts. He realized these weren't just personal memories bubbling up. Instead, they pointed to something deeper and shared, as if everyone carried echoes of humanity's oldest stories and fears. At the heart of the collective unconscious are what Jung called primordial images, or archetypes. These are universal patterns that show up in myths, art, and dreams all over the world. While there are many, two stand out for how often they shape our lives: the hero and the shadow. The hero archetype is the pattern behind stories of adventure and transformation, from ancient epics like the Odyssey to modern blockbusters. The journey of the hero isn't just about slaying monsters, it's about facing challenges, growing, and returning changed. We respond to these stories because, on some level, we recognize the journey as our own. The shadow, on the other hand, is the darker figure lurking in stories and dreams. It represents the parts of ourselves we'd rather not see, the traits we reject or hide. The shadow isn't always evil, but it is uncomfortable. It might show up in a dream as a pursuer or a menacing figure, or in a story as the villain the hero must face. Jung saw the shadow as a necessary counterpart to the hero, a force that challenges us to confront what we'd rather ignore. Archetypes don't just belong to myths or movies. They appear in our daily lives, especially in dreams. You might dream of an old mentor offering advice or a dark figure chasing you. For Jung, they are the mind's way of working through universal issues, using symbols that have always been with us. And next time you feel déjà vu, remember, your mind may be touching on that inherited blueprint. Jung believed the collective unconscious wasn't just a passive storehouse, but an active influence. He argued that the symbols we see again and again, serpents, for example, stuck with us because, for ancient people, encountering a snake could mean life or death. Over generations, these experiences shaped the stories and symbols that still surface in our dreams and art today. So when you find yourself drawn to certain stories, images, or even places, you might be responding to something much older than you realize. But what about the parts of these patterns that we try to keep hidden? The aspects of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge? That's where the shadow comes in, and it's a side of the collective unconscious that's harder to face. The shadow within is the part of ourselves we'd rather not acknowledge, the thoughts, impulses, and traits we push out of sight because we think they don't fit who we're supposed to be. For Carl Jung, the shadow wasn't some distant concept. It was a living part of every psyche, made up of the complexes, clusters of feelings and memories that get repressed when they clash with our conscious self-image. These complexes don't simply disappear. They gather in the personal unconscious, waiting for a moment to break through the surface. Jung explained that the shadow forms in direct contrast to the persona, which is the mask we show the world, our polite, curated self. The persona helps us fit in, but everything that doesn't match its standards gets pushed aside. Maybe you're the dependable friend who hides resentment, or the easygoing coworker who secretly struggles with envy. All those traits you disown become part of your shadow. Over time, this hidden side can start to influence your life in subtle and not-so-subtle ways. One common sign is projection, assigning your disowned traits to others, a phenomenon Jung observed in countless clinical cases. You might criticize someone as arrogant when, deep down, you're wrestling with your own need for recognition. Or you might find yourself annoyed by someone's ambition, not realizing it mirrors your own unspoken desires. Jung saw projection as the shadow's way of making itself known. using others as mirrors for what we refuse to see in ourselves. Sometimes, the shadow's influence is much stronger. In his clinical work, Jung described patients whose repressed material overwhelmed their conscious minds. One striking example is a patient with schizophrenia who experienced vivid visions of phallic symbols, images that, Jung argued, emerged from unintegrated shadow content and collective archetypes. When the shadow is ignored or denied for too long, it doesn't just stay hidden. It can erupt in dreams, compulsions, or even psychological crises. But the shadow isn't just a collection of negative traits. It's also a reservoir of untapped potential, creativity, assertiveness, even courage that's been pushed aside because it didn't fit the image we wanted to uphold. Jung believed that by facing the shadow, we could reclaim these lost parts of ourselves. Shadow work, as he called it, involves recognizing what we've buried, whether through self-reflection, dream analysis, or even active imagination. Dreams, especially, can be a direct line to the shadow's messages. A recurring nightmare or an unsettling figure might be your unconscious mind's way of asking you to pay attention. Consider someone who prides themselves on being calm and agreeable, yet finds themselves snapping unexpectedly. Through shadow work, they might discover repressed anger that, once acknowledged, allows them to set healthier boundaries. Or someone who avoids risk out of fear may realize they've buried their own drive to succeed. By integrating these hidden aspects, they gain a more balanced and authentic sense of self. Shadow integration isn't about erasing the parts of us we dislike. It's about accepting them and understanding their place in the bigger picture. This process is challenging, but it's essential for psychological balance. Jung saw it as a necessary step toward individuation, the journey to becoming whole, where the conscious and unconscious finally meet. Of course, shadow work is only one step in the journey toward Jung's ultimate goal, individuation. And as we look at the layers of the mind, conscious, shadow, and collective unconscious, it's clear that understanding ourselves is more complex and more rewarding than we might think. Jung showed us that personal repressions, hidden shadows, and shared ancestral blueprints together make us who we are. His work offers a way to understand not just our own struggles, but the universal patterns behind the stories and dreams we all share. Individuation, the process of bringing these layers together, isn't about chasing perfection, but about finding wholeness and meaning. If you've ever had a dream that felt bigger than you, hit like and subscribe to explore more hidden stories of legendary thinkers. What ancient myth lives in your dreams, your own epic waiting to be told?